We have a real treat for you guys today. We have Jessica Burgans, who is a licensed mental health counselor. She's also an Army veteran and part of one of the elite fighting forces, the Lioness team. She's helped build homes in some of the most impoverished places in the world. And now she's dedicated her life to helping other people improve their mental health by breaking negative patterns. So join me in welcoming Jessica Burgans to the show. Welcome to the Mental Health Janitors, where we help you clean up the mess in your head. I'm your host, Sergeant Q, and with me today, Jessica Burgans.
Hi, thanks, Sergeant Q. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you here, Jessica. Now, I remember there was a time in my life where I kept getting stuck in these patterns, where I keep repeating these things, and I called it getting stuck on stupid, because I would find myself doing these things that I didn't want to do and not doing the things that I wanted to do, and it was so frustrating for me. Once I recognized it, I had no idea what to do about it. So what is the one thing you want people to walk away with today?
Such a good question, Aaron, and so many people struggle with that. Ask me how I know. But really today, I want people to understand their brain and biology and how it explains why change can be hard. But it never removes your responsibility to do hard things anyways. So neuroscience shows that stress chemistry, habit wiring, and reward pathways absolutely influence our behaviors. But we've swung a little too far culturally into using biology as an excuse instead of using it just as information. Knowing why something is hard is very empowering, but knowing is only half the battle. The other half is choosing discipline, especially when you don't feel like it. Most real growth happens when people learn how the brain works first, take a breath, reset, and then do the work of building new patterns and pathways.
Yeah, I love that. I talk about that a lot, like getting stuck in a rut. And so tell me a time that you were actually stuck in a rut and you recognized it. And then, yeah, tell me about that, because I'm sure you have an experience where that's happened to you.
The most important and the biggest step point of my life, if we're going to circle around what I'm talking about today, is when I got back from Iraq and I was struggling with my mental health quite a bit, then went through a divorce and became a single mom. And so I was just really, really struggling with just my emotional, my mental health, everything. I was in agony. And I established a terrible habit where I was drinking every single day. And so I would come home from work or come home from whatever, and I'd go straight to the liquor cabinet. And because I'm Irish, obviously, and was in the army, I can drink a lot. And so I would take 2 triple shots back to back within 20 minutes of being home. And that would be just enough to kind of take that edge off. And then I would just, I got really good at it, a professional alcoholic pretty much, where I got that edge off and then I just coasted the rest of the night. And really it sounds terrible, but it's what kept me alive during that season of my life. And it's a terrible way of keeping me alive, but it did. And when I finally found a great counselor, she knew I wasn't to a place where I was ready for like abstinence, like AA. And so she introduced this idea of the pause. And so she said, go ahead, Jessica, when you get home from work, know that you can have that drink if you want it, but I want you to set a 10-minute timer and I want you to do something productive in those 10 minutes. Take a walk, listen to your favorite music, do a mindfulness meditation, something like that. And then that 10-minute timer goes off. If you still want to go have that drink, go have that drink. And I realized almost immediately my drinking cut in half. And I didn't know what was happening back then. I was still in survival mode. But now that I'm a licensed mental health counselor and I've done all this study and research on the brain, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what she did for me.
I love that, the pause. And I've talked about that on the Mental Health Janitors, the pause. That's your ACC, your anterior cingulate cortex, that is engaging, giving you the ability to pause and make a different decision instead of just reacting emotionally.
Maybe you guys haven't struggled with a drinking problem like I did, but I'm sure you have struggled at some point in your life in some kind of pattern that is destructive or dysfunctional because our brains are wired to avoid pain at all costs and seek relief quickly. I believe the real solution is helping people understand how their brain and body are influencing their patterns and then teaching them how to build the self discipline and new habits on top of that understanding. This belief matters because without it, people usually fall into one of two extremes, right? One of two pendulums. They either shame themselves constantly and think that they're broken, or they explain everything away through biology and they never challenge themselves to grow. When people understand both sides, they stop hating themselves for struggling, but they also stop waiting for change to feel easy. Neuroscience actually reveals that our brains form habits through repetition and context, making certain behaviors automatic. However, by increasing self awareness and consistently practicing new behaviors, like with that pause and that mindfulness, I was able to rewire those patterns. And that is supported 100% now by neuroscience. It's not just about understanding our brain's wiring, but it's also taking deliberate actions to create the lasting change that we want.
All right, Jess. Now, this is very complex issue. There's a lot of different things we could teach on and talk about. What's the thing that you're going to teach us today?
Basically, that your brain is wired for survival, not happiness, and nutrition is brain chemistry, not just calories. Stress chemistry drives behavior. You can't out discipline chronic stress chemistry forever. So then our patterns becomes wiring, and I want to help teach you compassion and responsibility. So you can be compassionate towards yourself and still expect growth from yourself at the same time.
All right, well, let's get into it. Tell me a little bit about nutrition. I mean, people talk about it, but they don't really ever tell us nutrition as far as brain chemistry. It's always just about body fuel. But you're telling me that it affects our brain chemistry. So let's get into that.
Cortisol is a stress hormone. So if you feel stressed and you get cortisol released in your body, you crave carbs. If you're stressed, right, your impulse control drops, your nervous system becomes dysregulated, and then emotional coping increases.
How does what we eat affect that, though?
Food is information for your brain, not just fuel for your body. So, blood sugar instability, for instance, creates mood instability. Inflammation creates anxiety, fatigue, brain fog. Gut health, maybe you've heard people say it is a second brain. So, poor gut health is directly related to serotonin and dopamine signaling. So, what we put in our body directly affects those neurochemicals that are released, and then those patterns continue to cycle over and over again without us even realizing it.
All right, Jess. So there's a lot of different foods out there. I know in my life, when I'm feeling stressed, like I want to go to the kettle corn, which is sweet and salty, or to the peanut M&Ms. Like that's my go-to. And here's what I learned. It's like, okay, if I do that, that's not healthy for me. And so I've learned to pause, which is what you talked about earlier, that pause for a minute. And I recognize I don't actually want these things. I'm feeling stress and I need relief. And so how do we do that? What happens in the brain? Can you break it down for us?
Yeah. So, right, you're not going to be a client of mine. You're not going to need my help. So, great. But really, it comes down to this: whatever we repeat our strengthens in our brain. So, if you feel stressed out, your body is craving a neurochemical to make you feel better, which could be dopamine. Stressed out, my body needs dope. It's trying to relieve itself from this uncomfortable feeling. So it goes to a quick relief to get that hit of dopamine, and your brain and all those talking parts are saying, "Ah, see, this gave you relief." And so what it's doing is creating patterns. This is how you fix feeling stressed. This is how you fix.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that I'm not actually craving the food. That's just a vehicle to get me the dopamine, which will then give me the stress relief that I'm looking for. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
I guess I love this. I'm not an army guy. Okay, I'm a Marine, but I love GI Joe. Knowing is half the battle. And you and I could talk for 3 hours about this right here.
I think we have.
Yeah, right. And I know our listeners don't have time for that, but you've actually created a tool for them because everybody who comes on gives the audience a free tool. So tell me a little bit about the tool that you've created to help people recognize these patterns.
Yes, Aaron, knowing is half the battle. It's one of my favorite quotes that I quote all the time. Also, you don't know what you don't know. It's one of my favorite mantras, right? And how many years did I struggle with alcohol and food and going to those things to get that quick, instant relief? And the army in me, right, is like, I'm just weak. I just don't have the discipline. And then I go through this cycle of shame and guilt, and that doesn't help anybody. It sure didn't help me. And so I created this free ebook, and it's literally called It's Not Just Willpower, right? Because your brain, nutrition, and stress patterns shape your mental health. And so I like to educate you first on how all of those things are connected, why willpower is only part of the story, and how your brain is built for patterns. And then that stress chemistry changes your cravings and your mood. Also, to know how nutrition directly affects your mental health, kind of like what we talked about earlier, inflammation and things of that nature. And then the brain, emotion, food loop that we subconsciously are constantly cycling around. And it's not just willpower.
You know what my wife calls that, Jess? She calls that food noise.
Yes, I love, yes.
Yeah, and she calls it food noise. And so she experiences that as well. And I understand that. I didn't have a name for it like that. But when I feel stressed, I want to eat M&Ms. And so she calls that food noise. And that's exactly what you're talking about. So if you guys want this free tool, Jessica's designed it for you guys. It's a quick, easy read. I've looked it over. Go to the website. The first one's free.com. You'll find Jessica Burgans there. You'll be able to get this free tool that's going to help you understand this brain body connection and break some of these patterns. Okay, Jess, I know my audience, and a lot of them are going to want to take the next step because we do three things here where we educate, we empower, and we encourage people to take the next step. So, what does the next step look like when it comes to this pattern recognition that you're talking about?
Yeah, Aaron, great question. So the next step with me would be a group pattern reset session. And this is really where we interrupt one pattern and build a new one. You are going to leave with one clear behavior plan and a simple strategy, and you can start immediately. Once you learn that pattern and get that one down from that week working together as a group, it's kind of gives you what you need to take off because it's copy paste. And you just keep doing the same thing with the other patterns in your life that you want to learn how to break. Yeah, I had a client once, Aaron, who had a pattern that was really, really dysfunctional for her. And she came home every day after a long drive home from work and went straight to the ice cream half gallon. And in learning what that stress was and how that pattern was built, pausing and building a new one, she only eats ice cream once a month now at a predetermined time and location and has a much healthier coping mechanism when she gets home from work now.
That's fantastic, Jess. I understand those patterns and those recognitions. I learned something today. I know the audience definitely learned something today. Go check out the first one's free.com, Jessica Burgans, and reset those patterns in your life. For the Mental Health Janitors, I'm Sergeant Q, and I'm out.